Hello students, do you have your PTE exam coming up pretty soon and want to practice with some repeated questions? Well, look no further. For a limited time only, we're providing access to our most repeated question bank for absolutely free of cost. All you gotta do is sign up using the link in the description down below or by scanning this QR code. All the best for your next PTE exam. Now on with this video. Cheers.
The arising concern that a lot of people have about raising children bilingually, especially the preschool year, is based on the conceptualization that the human brain at birth is essentially monolingual. And the reason why I come to this occasion. Because often the parents will ask me if they use two languages at home, will their child be confused, because they're hearing two languages? And parents are often asked my advice about whether they should use one language on parent role, which is widely known that parents who are raising children bilingually. And the reason why most people think this is a good idea is that it will help to reduce the risks of the children being confused. Because they were able to associate each language with the separate speaker. The fear is that both parents use both languages. Especially they use both languages interchangeable within the same conversation, within the same sentences. The child will not be able to separate the languages.
They call it the marshmallow test. A 4 to 6-year-old child sits alone in a room at a table facing a marshmallow on a plate. The child is told, if you don't eat this treat for 15 minutes you can have both it and a second one. Kids on average wait for 5 or 6 minutes before eating the marshmallow. The longer a child can resist the treat has been correlated with higher general competency later in life. Now a study shows that ability to resist temptation isn't strictly innate, it also highly influenced by environment. Researchers gave 5-year-old used crayons and one sticker to decorate a sheet of paper. One group was promised a new set of art supplies for the project but then never received it. But the other group did receive new crayons and better stickers. Then both groups were given the marshmallow test. The children who had been lied to waited for a mean time of 3 minutes before eating the marshmallow. The group that got their promised materials resisted an average of 12 minutes. Thus, the researchers note that experience factors into a child's ability to delay gratification. When previous promises have been hollow, why believe the next one?
Welcome to today's lesson. We're continuing with our study of taxonomy. Taxonomy is how scientists classify organisms into different groups based on the characteristics that they share. So, for instance, a good way to think about taxonomy is the U.S. Postal Service. If we want to send a letter to someone, we first start off by addressing it to the nation they are in. By default, we usually assume that's America, but it doesn't have to be. Treat England or Costa Rica or Spain. You put their nation or their kingdom. Then within that kingdom, you address it to a slightly more specific level, their states. So, for instance, South Carolina would be the same as a phylum. And within that state, you would address it to their city and then to their street number, the street they live on. Then you would address it to, say, their apartment complex, and within that complex, you'd address it by their last name to their family, and then finally their first name to the specific person you want to get it to. And in that way we're able to weed out all the 400 million people we don't want to send our letter to in America and pinpoint the exact person we want the letter to reach. And in the same way, scientists use a taxonomy chart to pinpoint a living creature and organism and how it relates to everything else in the world.
Now the economists calculated, it's a back-of-the-envelope calculation, that removing all immigration controls would double the size of the world economy, and even a small relaxation of immigration controls would lead to disproportionately big gains. Now, for an ethical point of view, it's hard to argue against a policy that will do so much to help people that are much poorer than ourselves. The famous RAND study reckons that a typical immigrant who arrives in US ends up with $20,000 a year. That's rough. It's not just the migrants themselves who gain, it's the countries they come from. Already, the migrants working for poor countries working in rich countries send home around $200 billion a year, through formal channels, and about twice as that through informal channels. And that compares to the neat $100 million that Western governments give in aid. These remittances are not wasted on weapons or siphoned off into Swiss bank accounts, they go straight into the pockets of local people. They pay for food, clean water, and medicines, they help kids in school, they help start up new business.
The skoog is a new universally accessible musical instrument. It is designed to use by children or adults with special needs, or in fact be used by anyone. It's soft, it's easy to play, it's robust, and it can be customized to suit anyone's abilities. The skoog helps students with special needs by allowing them to get involved in making music themselves. It's an instrument that they can play it and they can take ownership of and start creating their own sounds and music. Traditional instruments are the shape and size and made of the materials they are because of the sound that they need to make. If you want to make a sound like a plucked string, you need a string and it needs to be under tension, whereas with a skoog, because it's a mixture of software and a sensor, then thus the computer can handle making the sound. And so we can design an object that's designed to be touched and designed to be played with. In developing the screen and working with kids in the schools and in the classrooms, it's really helped us make the skoog something that's usable by the children themselves. They've informed us massively on how it needs to work, and they've given their opinions on colors and designs. And just the feedback they've given to us has been just marvelous. It's just so enriching, and it's really inspiring to actually work with these kids, particularly when you can provide them with an ability to start to playing their own music as opposed to just taking part through listening and listening to other musicians and really learning from.
Today we're going to recount heroic tales of superhuman feats of strength. When in the face of disaster, some people are said to have summoned up incredible physical power to lift a car off of an accident victim, move giant rocks, or like Big John of Song, single-handedly hold up a collapsing beam to let the other miners escape. Are such stories true? There are many anecdotes supporting the idea, but we're going to take a fact-based look at whether or not it truly is possible for an adrenaline-charged person to temporarily gain massive strength. In proper terminology, such a temporary boost of physical power would be called hysterical strength. The stories are almost always in the form of one person lifting a car off of another. In one case in Colorado in 1995, a police officer arrived at a single-car accident where a Chevy Chevette ended up on top of a baby girl and sank into the mud. The officer lifted the car and the mother pulled the girl out. In 2009, a man in Kansas lifted a Mercury sedan off of a 6-year-old girl who had been trapped underneath when it backed out on top of her. In 1960, a Florida mom lifted a Chevy Impala so that a neighbor could pull out her son, who had become trapped when he was working on the car and his jack collapsed. There's even the case where the MD-500D helicopter from Magnum, PI crashed in 1988, pinning the pilot under shallow water, and his burly friend, nicknamed Tiny, ran over and lifted the 1-ton helicopter enough for the pilot to be pulled out. And, of course, the list goes on, and on, and on. In each of these cases, some aspect of leverage or buoyancy probably played some role in reducing the magnitude of the feat to something more believable. And even lifting many cars by several inches still leaves most of its weight supported by the suspension springs. But our purpose today is not to debunk any of the specific stories. The majority of them are anecdotal, and interestingly not repeatable. In many cases, the person who summoned the super strength later tried it again only to find that they couldn't do it. Basically, what we have is a respectably large body of anecdotal evidence that suggests that in times of crisis, danger, or fear, some people have the ability to temporarily exercise superhuman strength.
Wilson came from a different world. He became the focal point of a mainstream American culture that only thought of modern literature and wanted it to be read and appreciated by ordinary people. They were not modernists in an abstract sense. Certainly some of writers like T.S. Eliot and Faulkner were too difficult for some of their writings to be read by ordinary people. But this was a world long ago, before the division between our brows or whatever had established itself as a part of our consciousness. Wilson was a major player in the successful effort of his generation to establish at the heart of American life and innovative literature that would equal the great cultures of Europe. He was not a product of a narrow-minded American studies training at all. He joined a high artistic standard with an openness to all experience and a belief that literature was as much of a part of life for everyone as much as it is for daily conversation. He thought that Proust, Joyce, Yeats and Eliot could and should be read by ordinary Americans, and he helped to make that to happen. With over 40 years unrivaled experience and a worldwide reputation, BSI leads the way in testing and certification of fire safety products. Based on our dedicated labs in Hemel Hempstead, our team provides BSI height mark and SAE testing and certification for a broad range of products, including fire extinguishers, hoses, alarm panels, and heat and smoke detectors. We help clients to gain access into the European market by ensuring that products meet all the CE mark requirements. And we are familiar with the market access regulations of most countries across the world, enabling customers to enter markets globally. The BSI height market is categorized as a British super brand and acknowledged the world over as a symbol of trust, integrity, and quality. It provides the reassurance that vital product safety and performance requirements have been met. Our team subject each product to a rigorous set of tests along with robust production control audits designed specifically to ensure that they perform to required standards of safety and quality. We test for compatibility of fire detection and fire alarm system components to ensure that they're compatible and connectable. This service meets the growing requirement of European regulatory authorities to meet national installation guidelines. We also perform tests on individual detection components.
Let's say if I'm asking which source do you often use to get information? Newspaper? Radio? TV? And the survey shows 62% of the people chose internet. You might be thinking I am going to say how important the internet is, or how quickly it has changed the world for a few years. But what if I tell you this survey is conducted on the website globalandmail.com? Our answer will be different. Because the people who did this survey on a website must be frequent users of internet. This sample is a biased sample. So we have to pay attention to how a survey is conducted.
Computer scientist Shwetak Patel and his team are developing new sensing systems. The initial focus was really around energy and water monitoring. They built a new generation of smart sensors that monitor electronic interference on a home's power line or water pressure changes in the plumbing. Most of this technology has already found industrial applications, and Patel and his team turned their attention to adapting the technology for personal health monitoring. So how do we take this noise and make it into a signal? Interest was hard to us in the core of what we did for many years, and we're taking that work and applying it to other domains. They're looking to take advantage of all the functionality built in our smartphones. With the user's permission, this app can use the microphone built into most smartphones to listen to background noises, such as coughing. Searching for patterns that suggest a trip to the doctor might be in order. We've constructed these models that try and understand how sound works, what its patterns are, and we give it a whole bunch of examples of different kinds of audio, things like people talking, things like people laughing, sneezing, and of course coughing. This app uses a phone's camera to check hemoglobin levels in blood by analyzing the color of capillary fluid through the skin. Generally, what happens is if you're anemic, your bloods may be a little less red, and we take advantage of that by putting your finger over a camera of a phone. The camera of the phone can actually see the coloration of the blood. And this test uses the camera to tell parents worried about jaundice in newborn infants. Now, jaundice is something that doctors who have seen tons of babies. He just can figure out on a very basic level of it. Is this baby, do they need to get treatment, or are they in a good condition, while the first-time parent has no idea necessarily what jaundice might look like. The researchers say the built-in sensors found in smartphones are already commonplace, but their applications and their implications for our health and well-being may be more far-reaching than we ever imagined.
Why does burning a food item provide information about its value as a food? The nutritional value of food can be measured on many different scales. The most basic measurement scale is the free energy content of the food. In other words, how much energy is released when chemical bonds within the food are broken. The energy content of food is measured in calories, the amount of kinetic energy required to raise the temperature of 1 ml of water, 1 degree. Food is burned under controlled conditions, breaking chemical bonds and releasing free energy. The burning is chemically similar to the breakdown of food in cellular respiration, although the process occurs much more quickly and in a less controlled fashion during ignition. Calorimeter can measure the energy in food, but cannot measure the digested energy of what we have.
This is a kind of object that you're probably all familiar with when you had the term robot, but I'm gonna show you the very first robots. They were characters in a play in the 1920s called Rossum's Universal Robots, and the play was written by Czech writer called Karl Čapek. And basically, these robots, people tend to think of robots as kind of cute cuddly toys or, Hollywood depictions kind of devoid of politics. But the first robots were actually created and imagined in a time of absolute political turmoil. You just had the First World War, it finished, had a devastating impact across Europe, and so people are kind of reflecting on what does it mean to be human, what makes us human, those kinds of question. And this kind of context is what inspired Čapek to kind of write this play. And interestingly, these robots being human, they are actually in the play assembled on a production line, a bit like the Ford manufacturing production line. So even though they are human, they are assembled, and these robots are designed to labor, and that is their primary purpose in society.
The historic town of Mostar, spanning from a deep valley of the Neretva River, developed in the 15th and 16th centuries as an Ottoman frontier town, and during the Austro-Hungarian period in the 19th and 20th centuries. Mostar has long been known for its old Turkish houses and old bridge, also named Stari Most. In the 1990s war, however, most of the historic town and the old bridge, designed by the renowned architect Sinan, was destroyed. The old bridge was recently rebuilt, and many of the edifices in the old town have been restored or rebuilt with the contribution of an international scientific committee established by UNESCO. The old bridge area, with its pre-Ottoman, Eastern Ottoman, Mediterranean and Western European architectural features, is an outstanding example of a multicultural urban settlement. The reconstructed Old Bridge and Old City of Mostar is a symbol of reconciliation, international cooperation, and of the coexistence of diverse cultural, ethnic and religious communities.
Straight salary sales compensation plans aren't very common, but they do have a place in some organizations. With this type of structure, you'd pay your salespeople a straight albeit competitive salary like all of your other employees, and nothing else. No bonuses, no commissions, and few, if any, sales incentives. This type of compensation plan is most often used when the industry you operate within prohibits direct sales, when salespeople work as part of small groups or teams and all contributions are equal, when your sales team is relatively small, or when your salespeople are expected to spend much of their time on other responsibilities other than selling. However, these plans don't tend to offer motivation to salespeople, as there are no incentives for them to work harder.
Salary plus commission sales compensation plans are possibly the most common plans used today. They're structured in a way that salespeople receive a lower base salary along with commission pay that makes up the majority of the total compensation. Organizations use salary plus commission sales compensation plans when there are opportunities to support all salespeople on this structure and when there are proper metrics in place for tracking sales to ensure that the splits are fair and accurate. This type of plan is often the better choice as opposed to straight salary because it offers motivation to increase productivity and to achieve goals. It also offers more stability. Salespeople will still get some types of pay even if they're in training, when sales are low during certain months, or if market conditions get volatile. However, it can be more complex to administer.
So, when we talk about the polar regions, just to clarify exactly what we mean. And we have first of all the Arctic at the top of the Earth and the Antarctic at the bottom, and so the Arctic was named after the Greek word for bear. Now surprisingly it's not after the polar bears that live in the Antarctic or live in the Arctic, and based on it's after the Little and Great Bear constellations that can be seen in the sky. Now the Greek also hypothesized that there would be the Anti-Arctic, which is how we get the name Antarctica, and of course it wasn't discovered until much later on. Now these regions are opposite in many ways other than just their names and their location on the globe, and so if we look at the Arctic first of all, and the Arctic is actually ocean surrounded by land, and so you can see here this is the UK down here in this kind of Russia, and then American Canada around here, and so there is a bit of land cover and a rice on the top in the Arctic, which is Greenland here, and may see all this area here. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't realize that this isn't actually land. The North Pole isn't on land. It's just one big ocean.
Turner, not surprisingly, painted one of the earliest pictures of London's fog, in the 1835 painting The Thames Above Waterloo Bridge. Turner is a true-born Londoner, is advertising his familiarity with London's air problem by putting smoke, an atmospheric pollution, at its center. And as you can see, in here, the bridge is the central elements, which is a theme that's later taken up by Monet. And it's partly obscured by the steam and smoke which rises from both sides of the river. Here, we see a shot tower. I think you can just about to see, which was constructed in 1826. Do you know what shot towers are? They produce shot for guns, ammunition. And they were very smoky, one of the more smoking industries. But it's barely visible, as you can see, as are the various industries on the Lambeth side of the river. On this side, there's a steamship about to dock or preparing to leave. It's black smoke thrusting up to join the kind of swirling arc of smoke there. William Rodner sees this painting as a potent essay on the energy and complexity of modern polluted organism. Smoke, I think, here represents for a flourishing economy, which brings employment and food on tables, but also the dirt and pollution associated with the fumes all seems to be tainted by sulfurous yellow.